invite the rest of the panel to join me on stage, please. Hello, everybody. Oh, that's a very hot mic. I know. It's the end of the day, and you all are here with me. My name is Merisa Heu-Weller. I'm Chief of Staff at Microsoft in our Technology and Corporate Responsibility team. Today, I am your Firestarter, which I like to call the informal hype woman before the panel. So I'm here to get your energy up, get you inspired, and get you excited. Yes, thank you, Kiara. And quite honestly, I've been looking forward to this all day because I get to announce a piece of news toward the end of my comments. But before I do that, let me set the stage a little bit. We have heard a lot about AI today, and it struck me how AI is kind of becoming quietly infused into everything we do. From the mundane, like when I'm near my local grocery store and my phone reminds me that I wanted to pick up some extra apples on my way home, to the momentous. AI and machine learning are accelerating advances in cancer research, which will benefit so many. And with this unparalleled era of opportunity, we also know and need to acknowledge that the impacts, both positive and negative, of AI will not be experienced universally. We heard at the top of our sessions today about facial recognition technology and how if you are a Caucasian or lighter-skinned man, the accuracy rates are really quite great. However, that accuracy drops significantly if you are a man of color, especially with darker skin, and it drops yet again significantly if you're a woman of color with darker skin. So the issues and the enormity of AI in our society is complex and feels very urgent. And that's why I love the unapologetic boldness of the Women's Forum to lead in this space through its Women for AI Daring Circle. And as the lead strategic committee member, as part of this Daring Circle, Microsoft has had a front row seat to see all of the hard work that's happened in the last year as we've gathered hundreds of data points through surveys, through interviews with industry experts, to yield a few stark findings, and I'll show you some of them. But the overall frame is there's broad sentiment and buy-in that all of our organizations need to be thinking about the gender impact of AI. But the thing is, the vast majority of our organizations are not equipped to do that yet. I'm clicking my clicker. There we go. So this is a lot of data to take in, and I will encourage you that this is available also in your booklet. But the one data point I wanted to point out is the 53%. 53% of our survey respondents said it's very, very important for all functions in our organizations to receive ethical AI training. And yet, only 14% of those respondents said that their organization was equipped to do that. So there's a huge gap there. And here's the news. Today, I'm excited to announce that the Women's Forum is taking a huge swing at closing that gap, issuing a Women for AI call to action. And what we want to do here is invite all of you on a one-year commitment to look at how our organizations are ensuring that gender is included as we think about how we develop and deploy artificial intelligence. And we share with each other not just what we're learning, but what we're doing to address this. So of course, for a company like Microsoft, this is a top-line business priority. But for me, this is also very personal for one reason in particular. This sassy and smart 12-year-old in front of you is my daughter. Sometimes I call her Mini-Me. She aspires to be an engineer. Actually, I would say she is an engineer. And I see this call to action as a meaningful and important step to ensuring my daughter, your daughters, the future female CEOs and scientists and activists We'll not be talking in 20 years about the impact of AI on gender, but how women are leading the way, harnessing AI to create a more equitable, a more just, a more fair world for women and for humanity. So with that, thank you. I would like to hand it over to our panel. Victoria, thank you, and enjoy your conversation.
Thank you so much. Is this working? It is. Good evening, everyone. My name is Victoria Strachwitz. I'm a Senior Managing Director at FTI Consulting, and I lead the People and Change practice in EMEA. I'm actually standing in today for Julia Harrison. She's an amazing female leader, a successful businesswoman, and a lovely colleague and friend of mine. And Julia is very sorry to not be here this evening, but she sends her warmest regards to every one of you here. As a consultant advising companies through transformation and helping the people aspects of these changes happen, the discussion around AI and technology truly infected me. I see so many of my clients go through digital transformation, and the questions that it poses: what does this do to my organization? What does it do to my people? What does it do to how we work, and what it does to our culture? So a topic of mine there is diversity, and I think a lot of my clients have understood that this is not a nice to have, but that this is actually a business critical aspect to how we're going to work in future. I'm honored to be here this evening. We have an incredible group of female leaders and experts at this panel. I'm definitely not the expert, so I'm hoping that we're going to encourage some conversation around this topic, and obviously encouraging further discussion outside of this panel. There are some great topics on the agenda over the next days, so do follow up with discussion. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pose a question to each of our panelists now, and give you a very brief introduction to each of them. So, our first one, Julia. Julia, it is absolutely lovely to have you. Julia is the founder of Editorial Intelligence. She's an entrepreneur, a writer, and a speaker, and passionate, so I hear, about the human side of the machine age. Julia, I think it would be really interesting for the audience if you could give us your take on what the next decade of the world of work actually looks like.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Talk about pressure, to open a large discussion about this. I'm going to be speaking a little bit more over supper about the human in the machine age. And I suppose I want to just frame my remarks against a backdrop that says that women, and indeed men, don't think of the machine in their lives. They think of the human in their lives. And so even though a lot of AI and machine learning is increasingly embedded and invisible, we need to make sure that going forward, in particular the world of work, is a place where the humanity remains. And that, I think, is one of the great challenges over the next 10 to 15 years, because everything is embedded in and surrounded by technology. If I could just ask you to look back over the last 100 years at the three great shifts of the workplace. One of them is, of course, industrialization and globalization. One of them, of course, at least in industrial societies, is feminism and the rise of full-time employment for a large number of women. And the third shift is, of course, the internet, that we're now in an era of the death of distance, where everything is conducted on a smartphone, and we have therefore entered the always-on era. And this is one of the biggest challenges, I think, for women in the workforce over the last 10 to 15 years, is that we were promised freedom and flexibility, and what we really got was full-time, part-time. And going forward, I would, I guess, observe the following over the next 10 to 15 years, and I choose that timeline deliberately. The first reason is that Facebook is 15 years old this year, so I'm not sure we can look further than 15 years ahead with any certainty whatsoever, because things are changing so fast. The observation that I would give is that over the next 15 years, we are going to have to create much more values-based, human capital-based systems to work alongside those of the machines, or we are going to empty our workplaces out of talent. So the first prediction is that human capital and human resource is going to change. The second prediction is not so much a prediction as a fact, which is that half the world's workforce, as in half the world's service sector workforce, let's not forget that the vast majority of the world's working workforce still works in agriculture or in street hawking. But those of us, if you like, in the professional classes, half of us will be freelance by 2030. So there will be no more full employment. There will only be flexible, versatile employment. And with that, there won't really be any more offices. The mobile workforce, generation mobile, applies across all the generations. And so my final observation, because there's so many brilliant women here, I don't want to hog the conversation, but my final observation is that we need to narrow the gap between the rise in senior women in management, which is very welcome, and those actually doing the jobs that are going to be most affected by AI and machine learning, which is not jobs overall in senior management. And specifically, I'd like to leave you with one data point, which is that of all the workers actually designing AI and working in AI and creating the systems that will affect the roughly 50% of women who work, only 11% are women. So there is a lot of work that still needs to be done.
Julia, thank you so much. And that is actually a teaser for this evening. So we're looking forward to your dinner speech. And hopefully everyone has signed up for their dinners and their amazing speakers. Our next panelist is Maud Bailey. Maud, thank you for being here today. Maud is Chief Digital Officer at Accor, heading a team of over 200 people. And that is actually real-life implementation of a digital transformation sitting right here on the panel. Maud, I think we would be interested to hear your views, and maybe you can share some examples around the actual implementation of AI within a company. And maybe adding to that, what works and what doesn't work?
Hi. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. So from a company perspective, to share with you some very tangible examples. AI is already everywhere. And you're not necessarily aware of that, but you're feeding the machine. You're giving your data. Even without your consent or even being necessarily aware of that, you're giving your data. I don't know if you're aware of that, but you're giving your data. So once we get the data, we have to be compliant and responsible. And I'm really paying attention to GDPR, not because it's a regulation which is mandatory, but because it means something about responsible AI. But we'll talk about it later. So back to your question, Victoria. AI, we use it, for instance, to better target the people who are sending emails in order to avoid the spam box. Like Chiara, do you want to go there? And whereas Chiara is going to be expecting for an amazing 5-star spa, right? So because I'm quoting it like this, but just giving an example. So using the data of Chiara and her preferences, I'm going to be able to use AI in a smart way to personalize the offer I'm going to send to her. We're also using AI for contact centers. If we can recognize the person, which is a loyalty member, calling, then according to his needs, we will direct the customer to the most skilled and gifted and competent advisor on the phone to make sure he will manage to enter as soon as possible to the guest expectation. We also use AI on chatbot. Voice is not completely a reality yet, but still, and it's going to come very soon. According to a recent Gartner survey, by 2020, 75% of the American households will have a voice device or voice equipment at home. If we translate that to Europe, it could be in 6 or 7 years. So usage will change, and you will dramatically use voice and then AI. So it's a reality and it works. And for me, it has to be at the service of what we're good at in hospitality industry, i.e. personalization. Therefore, to answer what does not work, I don't think that full automation with AI will ever work, and we don't want it. My purpose is to use digital as well as AI as incredible levers to empower the human touch, but it should never replace it. Don't ask me to create an hotel with only robots and machine learning and AI stuff welcoming you like, hello, Julia. Forget about it. Oh, it's not going to be me. So what won't work is full automation with no more human. But AI, responsible AI, with digital smart solution to empower human, definitely. And it will also have an impact on education, skills for our people. And we, as leaders, Julia, you are so right, have the responsibility to anticipate it, to train them, to make sure they are ready. Voilà.
Merci. I'm glad you said that we won't have a fully automated robot-run hotel. That's maybe hope for us there. Yas is our next panelist. Yas, welcome on stage. Thank you for being here. Yas is a partner at Shearman and Sterling, and she has a load of titles that we agreed not to pronounce out, but maybe one of them, co-head of international arbitration practice and lead of the public international law practice. Yes, we would be very interested, as a lawyer, taking a perspective on this panel around the world exploring this huge challenge around legislative approaches to actually govern AI and the application and impact it has. So how can we build a regulatory framework that allows both innovation but also protection of the workforce?
Thank you very much, Victoria. It's a great pleasure to be here. I want to make two remarks. The first remark is, and referring to what Julia just said, it is a revolution. AI is a revolution, an industrial one. But it's also a political, societal, sociological, economic, and you will address that, Gina. So we have to look at AI in a different way, and I want to refer to the writings of Antoine Garapon, who's a magistrate and writer, and he defines AI in his book on digital justice as a new expression, a new way of expression without any spatial boundaries. And an entirely new world is going to come out of that, including in the legal world. Examples. What do you do when you have an intellectual property question? Who's the owner of the AI work product? Is it the inventor of the AI, or is it the owner of the AI? In the transportation world, when you have an accident, a car crash, who's responsible? The notions that we have of civil and criminal liability today are not designed for the new AI world, where you will have more liability towards manufacturers and service providers and less focus on the human fault or the human intention or human reasonableness. Another example, GDPR, of course, and data protection. How do you make the balance between databases? And AI, by definition, relies on data and humongous volumes of data and privacy. Another example is explainability. And really on women issues, bias is a hugely important question. How do you explain, how do you make reasons for an automated AI decision-making process, and how do you avoid black boxes and allow less bias? So these are an entirely new world of questions and legal questions that are not answered to yet, and so there's a universe of new rules and new framework and legal framework that will have to be developed on that basis. My second remark is that precisely on the legal framework, we're looking at a very complex world. So you have on the one hand states that are very active in the space, who issue regulations and legislation and do studies at a national level, France, the UK, Singapore, or at an international level, and you have the OECD, UNESCO, Council of Europe are doing a lot of work in that regard. But this work is, for now, not a lot of binding work. You don't have a lot of conventions. You have a few laws. And the reason for that is that for having an effective regulation, you have to have a vision. And simply in a world that's very international, where you have world champions, where you have sovereignty issues, and you have a race to technology, and 86%, I think, of the capital investment is just only China and the US. So in that race for technology, how do you define a common vision at an international level between all these players? So that's one big challenge. And aside of that, you have the private sector. And this is really and that will be my call for action. The private sector is very active. You have also rules and regulations and guidelines and studies. The problem with the private sector is that these are non-binding, these can be scattered, they can be more or less neutral, depending on whether or not these guidelines are proposed by the actors and the designers of AI. So then we're in a world where you have to have this mix with a lot of focus on the private sector, I think, and the importance of awareness. And I think that this is where the Women's Forum is doing a great job, and we have to continue that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Yas. So I'm glad to hear that the ethics piece of AI is starting to be on the radar of a lot of discussions. Our next panelist, and Elena, I'm very honored to have you here on stage. Elena Bonatti is the Minister of Equal Opportunities and Family in Italy, and she is an Associate Professor of Mathematical Analysis at the University of Milan, so an expert in the field. Elena, I think it would be interesting for everyone here this evening to hear your thoughts about what role government could and should play in ensuring that AI in workplace becomes a positive driver for maybe even women in particular. And do you think that current policies are fit for purpose?
Thank you for the introduction, and I'm very honored to be here. And let me start by saying that it is true that technological change and artificial intelligence have created widespread fear of job losses and of further rises in inequality. Indeed, it is true, and we know that artificial intelligence will create a different way also in the work world, and in particular with artificial intelligence, millions of jobs will disappear. But we know also that millions of jobs will grow up, and that we will need millions of new skills, in particular in STEM fields. So this is a great challenge for our society, but there is a risk. We have to know that we have a great risk, because we know that the disruption will affect more women than men. And so the responsibility of the governments is to avoid to have this gap between men and women in the future. We need to uphold equal rights to ensure quality of women work, and to remove all discriminatory practices, and to protect women, but also to promote the empowerment of women. And we have to start with the education and the formation of women in the STEM fields. I think that we should create a new, let me say, STEM skills programs for the new employment in the future for women, and in particular for women, because it is our priority to build capacities, to develop innovation, and to connect science and society. And to do this, I think that the empowerment of women will be an important ingredient. I think that women can be leaders in this goal, because women in the science have some attitudes, important attitudes: creativity, courage, the possibility to imagine the future, generativity of food. And the second ingredient is that women know very well that they need leadership, but also teamship. And this is very important in constructing the wave of workers for the future, also in artificial intelligence. And the last ingredient I would like to suggest is to change our policies in regulating the work time. not only to protect women and men, but to ensure a more integrated vision of life and life quality, also in the fields of workers. And I think that this will give us a new way to face the challenges of the future. So a more integrated vision also in the new fields of artificial intelligence.
And I think you're already quite active in Italy around that, are you not?
Yes. We are trying to promote some policies about this, in particular in the empowerment for the STEM's knowledge for women, but also some policies with the families and the possibility to promote sharing of responsibility between men and women, also in the so-called care work at home, but to promote the presence of women in their entrepreneurship in all the fields of our society. In addition, I have to say that the possibility to develop new policies to ensure the knowledge of women in the fields of artificial intelligence will give also some more role model for women in this field, because let me say that one of the risks of the artificial intelligence is that we can think that we can be replaced by something which is not a human part of us, but it is not true, because in some sense women has those attitudes which cannot be replaced and which promote the integral vision of the human part of our intelligence, so the brain and the heart, which work together. And so this is the new fields I think we have to develop also in the policies of our countries.
Thank you, Elena. Gina. Our fifth panelist is Gina. Gina Neff is a professor at Oxford, and she has published 3 books and over a dozen pieces of research on innovation and the impact of digital transformation. And Gina, with your background and research, conducted around AI's impact on women and on their role in society, could you briefly frame for us where you see the key challenges? And most importantly, we'd be really interested, what do you think we can actually do to ensure that it works for female workforce?
Right now, we frame the debate about AI and ethics about some faraway future. And if you take the headlines from newspapers, we are afraid of this future AI, but I would argue society is not ready for the AI we have right now. In all of these talks, we've had examples from our email to our GPS systems, to our recommendation systems, of how we're surrounded by smart AI systems that are trying to bring together data. And yet I see 2 key social impacts that we're not, as societies, planning for. And the first is biased data and biased systems. Right now, AI systems are being developed in a way, at best, to be gender blind. But gender blind will fail in AI systems. Just this week, we've had headlines from major companies releasing products and services that differentiate between men and women in very different and sometimes unexplainable, unexpected ways. From hiring to credit, we're seeing offers out there that are not just reproducing the bias that we have in society, but we're amplifying bias through AI systems. So that's one of the key challenges we have to solve. The second, and you've heard a bit of it from my fellow panelists, is the impact AI will have on workplace. And one of the ways we've been talking about this problem is again, I would argue, a pretty high level. And it's time now, especially recognizing the expertise in the room, it's really time now for us to get much more granular data on what is happening in practice as we apply and use AI in a whole host of settings. So to go back to those headlines, right? If major companies who are developing AI tools are getting it wrong, what does that mean for organizations like mine and for many of you in the room, like yours, where we're going to buy AI solutions from vendors that are going to run on our systems and with our data? We absolutely have to understand the impact in our own organizations and in our own workplaces. And so with that, I would just leave you with a couple of concrete problems. I mean, put these two things together, and we may well be looking at AI that decimates the advances that women have made in the workforce. In the UK, we've just released a study this year that looks at the chances someone has a job that's highly likely to be automated. So rather than say we're going to lose X number of jobs, that's really pretty abstract. What percentage of your job has routine tasks that AI in the next 5 years will be able to handle? And can we take a look at that percentage, jobs with higher percentage of those tasks more likely to automate? The UK did an analysis of their national economy. Women hold 70% of those jobs, right? Robots are not coming for your jobs. Robots are coming for women's jobs. And we have to be really clear, I think, on the granular impact within our organizations. So what do we do about this? Well, I think conversations like this is one way to start. I know we have other solutions that will come out. And I think the call for organizations to join with the Daring Circle on AI to monitor your own systems, provide information and best practices, and allow the Women's Forum to be a world global leader in reflecting back what we can do for combating this kind of bias in our organizations is really one of the first steps that I think we together can take.
Thank you so much. So we have started to scratch the surface on a couple of points that I'd like to dive into a little bit of detail around. One of them is that we very clearly hear that the robots are coming after the women's jobs. I'd like to understand a little bit more how AI really impacts these different segments around society. So for example, highly skilled or lower skilled jobs, is it female, male? Is it certain professions that we're looking at that will be impacted through AI? And Julia and Gina, and Julia, maybe you want to make a start. Just a couple of thoughts from your side, and Gina, maybe then passing on to you. I know you're doing a little bit around your RISE initiative within your company, so maybe a couple of thoughts from both of you. Sorry, Gina, sorry. Sorry.
Yes, well, I certainly agree with Gina that the risk is that senior women in management are on the rise and all the other women in the workforce are at the greater risk of AI. So, for example, in the US, unfortunately, there's still so much better data coming out of the US than anywhere else, although I'm sure the OECD also has some great data. But just based on the US alone, 85% of bank tellers are female. Well, the financial services are very much at risk of automation, for instance. Yaz, as you've also mentioned, the legal profession is going to be completely decimated. So I think that the challenge is the women-to-women gap. We've focused very much up until now, quite rightly, on the male-to-female gap of equality and pay. But the nuances are coming much more into light now. And that means that the low-paid or the no-paid at risk from AI. And just one other quick word about the ghost workers. The women who are, and it is usually women, but not only women, who are doing the human jobs that mop up behind the AI in Amazon warehouses, or, these are the invisible jobs. And we have to make every single job in the economy visible and valuable.
Great. Gina, do you mind quickly adding some thoughts from your side on that one?
I've spent a decade studying digital transformation in the construction industry. We don't think of construction as high tech. And we certainly know that in most of our economies, many construction jobs are not the high-paying professional jobs, right? They're trades work that I've been studying. And when we look at the complexity in construction of how they have adopted new AI-based tools for automating some parts of the construction planning process, we see some really interesting lessons that I think we all can take away from that. The new tools didn't get rid of the need for humans to do work. It changed the nature of the complexity of their jobs. So we have to be really focused, I think, on what we consider routine work, and sometimes what we consider routine work, what AI engineers and organizational planners and management are thinking of as quite routine, actually is serving multiple purposes. It may be routine that we just need a quick meeting to discuss this, but that quick meeting may be the source, the genesis of some kind of organizational learning or knowledge that sparks innovation in another part of the process. It may be routine so that we can get rid of this particular job. But that job was a rung on a job ladder, of a career ladder and a progression that was helping someone learn and get training to go into other positions. So I think we have to, we still need much more research on how these changes are coming, who is being affected, and then what kinds of organizations do we need to build and rebuild in order to make sure that we have a just transition and a fairer society.
And Elena, maybe just you were starting to talk about what you're already doing in Italy around that. Are there any additional thoughts around the STEM initiative you're doing in Italy, but also anything else that government can do to support exactly what you've just been talking to, Gina?
Yes, in particular in the last years, we have worked a lot about the education, and in particular in the primary and the secondary school. We have organized some STEM courses during the summer for students, and in particular for girls. But I think that now a further step has to be done here in Italy, but also in Europe and in all the world. In some sense, I have already said that the possibility of the empowerment of women in the science and in the STEM fields or artificial intelligence is very important, not only to ensure high skills to face the jobs of the future, but also to promote a presence of women in our society now. Because science, I have to say that it is the real place of democracy and of the real empowerment of men and women. Because science is a place where everyone can do something, and that promoting a relationship between people, to promote the capacity of facing new challenges, but not in an individual way, but always in a team. And these are very important ingredients for our society for the future. So how to transform these ideas in policies for a government? I think that in particular now we have to promote the presence of women in all the places of workers, and in particular to promote the possibility of thinking of women, of promoting the creativity of women, also during the part of the life, for instance, during the maternity, in which a woman does not work. So we are trying to introduce a new way of formation and improvement of knowledge and digital knowledge. For instance, during the part of the life when a woman is a child, we have an experimental project for this in our ministry concerning the empowerment of women and the possibility to have some high skills competence also for the artificial intelligence for women who are not at work during the maternity. And the last but not least, we have also to ensure the gender pay between the role of women and men, and I think that in the fields of the science of artificial intelligence, this can be done with more effective occasional way. So this is the last direction I would suggest to make a new challenge for us.
That's great. The second topic that we were picking up a little bit in this discussion is around bias, unconscious bias. When we talk about AI in its programming and design phase, how that can actually have an effect around pulling through the entire implementation. So I'd like to kind of pick this up because obviously the Daring Circle work has surfaced that the awareness is quite low around that. And that all of the activities are quite varied around that, to put it nicely. So maybe we'd like to pull out some examples around where the barriers are, but also where the next steps are to rid of this unconscious bias and implement AI responsibly with an aim to ensure that it's a positive driver and benefits everyone inclusively. Maud, and now I mean what I said earlier, maybe you would like to talk a little bit about the work you're doing internally around your RISE program. I think that would be an interesting insight.
Okay. RISE is an internal Accor initiative. It's an informal internal network gathering now over 29,000 people in the company. What is the RISE purpose? It's about diversity, not only gender equity, but really diversity as a key lever of collective performance, i.e. men and women, senior and juniors, not just millennials in company, and also multicultural backgrounds, because we do believe that diversity is our biggest richness. Now, back to diversity and AI, and making sure, as you were speaking so well about it, Gina, we are not creating a biased AI. I just want to share with you something which is a very personal conviction, and I'm not a specialist, as you ladies, but we will have the AI we deserve. We will have the AI we deserve. AI is just a robot. It's machine learning. We are the creators. We are designing it, okay? We are feeding the machine or the beast. So when we talk about AI threatening women, it's just because AI today is a reflection of the society we've been creating. Women may be more threatened by AI, but because today they are the weakest and most fragile part of the workload and the workforce, right? So if we want to change, but if we want to change it, we have the mean to do it, but it's now. So which kind of concrete actions can we do? First, starting being aware of that with public sectors, but also private sector, because there is no barriers in digital era. Private and public authorities do share the same responsibility. Two, feed the AI with the non-biased data. So to give very humble examples, in my data scientist team, I really paid attention to one point. I've got 50% women. And I'm trying to implement the RISE rules to this team to make sure the teams who are training the AI machine at Accor are also embodying a kind of diversity, because AI is also the reflection of society and the reflection of our companies. And last but not least, let's make sure that the AI tools we are using are society AI, responsible society AI compliant. We should design some responsible AI standards for public and private actors to make sure we recognize ourselves in 5-10 years in the AIs we are currently creating now. So there is no fate in AI. It's just us being aware of the society we want to reflect through AI.
Thank you. Right, we're out of time. I do want to hear Yaz's final remarks, though, because I think they're really valuable from the kind of legal part. We are running out of time, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Just one reference. There's a lot that's done. I want to refer to the OECD initiatives. There's a lot of very important principles adopted. In 2020, February 2020, OECD will launch the Observatory, AI Policy Observatory, which is a very important initiative, and that will help us understand a better framework, have a legal framework for this. I also want, in the private sector, I want to refer to what I found extremely helpful initiative, the Women Leading in AI. They adopted the report in 2019 on 10 principles of responsible AI. I'm not going to refer to them now, but these contain extremely helpful principles from the private sector to help, in a very concrete manner, how we can implement a responsible AI, both at the macro level and at a micro level. And going to the sociological aspects, it does contain principles on training, on skill sets, on understanding where people are falling behind and filling the gap. And so I want to refer to that work because that's a very important work in the private sector, and I think that there's a lot to be done there.
Is that your call for action too, yes?
My call for action is precisely to, for between now and next year, for the Women Forum to issue a best practices from the private sector, because we have the luxury of a formidable platform of partners and private sector partners to issue what is it the best practice, so that we can then develop this for more binding standards in the world. So my call for action is best practices within a year on AI and the use of AI in the workplace and how we can support women in the workplace through AI.
That's a very good closing remark.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Thank you.